Welcome everyone to the fourth episode of Agroecology around Arran. I'm your host Wallace Curry, and in this special series of the Agroecology podcast we're taking a circular trip around the island I call home to explore what makes the food and farming system here so unique and what others can learn from Arran's example. If you missed the first 3 episodes exploring meat production, dairy and arable farming, I'd encourage you to go back and give them a listen so you can enjoy the full journey so far. In today's episode, we're going to meet 4 inspiring guests who are championing small-scale horticulture, alternative food systems, and pollinator conservation on Arran. We learn how market gardens, community growing projects, and foraging initiatives are helping to celebrate local produce, reconnect people with the land, and strengthen community well-being. We also explore the important role that bees and honey production play in supporting biodiversity and pollination around the island. Our first stop is the village of Umlash, home to the Cordon Community Garden, where we meet Simon Ross-Gill from the Pioneer Project. Simon returned to Arran in 2017 after many years living in Peru and is passionate about working with local people to build a more sustainable and self-sufficient food system. We're now here with Simon Ross-Gill, who is involved in the Pioneer Project. Simon, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you for coming on and taking your time.
Thanks for inviting me to the podcast.
It's an absolute pleasure. Simon, can you start by explaining what the Pioneer Project is and how it first began here on Arran?
Sure, the Pioneer Project is a community interest company that was founded in March 2020, and that was during the lockdown. It was set up in order to turn disused land to food production and supporting communities around Arran to do that. So during 2020 and 2021, we helped to establish several community gardens around the island, supporting local communities in each of the villages to set up community gardens for growing veg and for producing food. We've helped to establish the gardens. Crucially, we don't run the gardens, we've helped to get them set up, but the gardens are run by the various communities where they are in the different villages, which are Lochranza, Parnmill, Corrie, over in Shiskin. We've helped to set up a couple at Bellevue Farm. Also, we've supported Cladach Garden in Brodick, and in Umlash we've helped to set up the Cordon Community Garden and a garden along at Cloughlan's next to the outdoor centre.
Quite a quick response to set this up in March 2020, given COVID started, was it 23rd, 21st of March? It was only had about a week left and you managed?
It all happened very quickly. I think we constituted the organisation on the 1st of May 2020. So it all happened very quickly. It was very fast moving, and I think that was partly because of the time. There was a real question over where food was going to come from. At that point there was a supply chain disruption all across the United Kingdom, and that was all the more acute in an island like Arran, because we obviously have a ferry, and the ferry at that point was unlimited capacity. Empty supermarket shelves were not like some dystopian future. This is something we've actually seen in Arran in the last several years, not just because of coronavirus actually. There have been other factors that have led to that happening as well.
Simon kindly invited us out to the community garden at Cordon to have a chat on site, so let's head out there to do so.
Volatility is the word I'd use. I mean, the storms just seem to be a little bit stronger, and the rain when it comes just seems to be a little bit more torrential. So diversity is the key for us. Diversity is always really the solution, because the more variety of things that you plant, then the more chance there is that something will succeed. You're always going to have failures in a garden, and something that does really well one year is not always necessarily going to do well the next year, but just trying to plant as much diversity as possible. And actually, the more years I do this, I kind of come back to like a core of things that are going to do well in Arran. And we'll go show you the garden right now, because we've got a few of those things growing. This is a real classic Arran plant, which is elder. Elder is grown a lot, and you'll find elder often in hedgerows, or in places like in ruined villages and things like that around the island. You'll often find elder growing because it was so revered.
I love elderflower.
Elder's one of my favourites, and there's a really well established one over here, which has just got its flower coming. Oh wow. So the garden is roughly structured now. On my right hand side here you'll see all the apple blossoms. So that's all apple trees on that side, and then that moves into this side here. You've got soft fruit, which is all blackcurrants, blueberries, raspberries, gooseberries, red currants, and side here is a bit of a wilder side. We did have a polytunnel there, but it was a second-hand kind of ramshackle job, so we've discontinued that, and in the place we've got a geodesic dome.
Yep.
and our glasshouse as well. So those two things have been installed in the last year. So this is our honesty box, which is all built from recycled pallets, and just we built this a few years ago. So all the produce from the garden just comes out here. Not all of it, mostly at the moment. The produce that's grown goes towards the volunteers, and then any surplus would kind of come out here in the summer.
Is that the sort of focus, Simon? You know, you talked about post-COVID. Was the focus someone? You know, a lot of people were hemmed in the house and all that wanted to produce their own food.
Completely.
And they could come here. Was that the goal?
That was the goal. Yeah,
Yep.
that was the goal
Yep.
in all of the gardens, to give people a space that they could come together and grow. And I mean, even people with their own gardens as well. These gardens have been really valuable because it gives a place for people who are quite experienced gardeners to come and learn from and share experiences as well.
Yes, yeah.
These are all our tatties here, and that's all grown in seaweed, which we've collected from the beach.
Excellent.
Those two, and then this year we've done 3 rows that are using our own compost. You can see our compost bays up at the back, up there. So these are just in our own compost, but you can see the ones that we did. Those are our early ones coming up here. Which I always find amusing, because obviously having lived in Peru, there was such a vast variety of different colours of potatoes and everything. So to come back to Arran, and Arran kind of is quite fiercely proud of its potato tradition as well. Donald McKelvey lived just down the road from here, that he did all of the experimentation with varieties.
We were just talking about that recently.
Yeah. So Arran Victory, Arran Pilot, Arran Banner, and there are others. And we do have some Arran Victory in here as well, which is that's the only one of his varieties that you can really get commercially. Pilot was on the market, but it seems to have dropped off in the last year or so. But there's nobody doing it in Arran.
Yeah.
There's nobody doing potato seeds. We get all our seeds from a company called Potato House in Dundee.
Right.
So, I mean, they do have Ayrshire Tatty days and things like that as well, but I've never made it over to one of them. So we've got our shallots and onions in here, and then that's the end of our kale. So we grow kale, and that's another Arran staple, which is just so abundant. You can plant kale in August and you can have kale all winter if you do it right. And that could be really important as well do you know about the hunger gap? The hungry gap. It's just that point just between March and April, when you're running towards the end of your winter supplies and there's nothing growing still. You've still got to get your seeds in for spring. So it's like kale is a really good one to kind of bridge that gap, because you can have kale going through that if you plan it right, like right through that season. So
the project itself, Simon, is rooted in permaculture principles. What, first off, does that actually mean in practice when you're working with community gardens on the island?
Well, it's certainly rooted in permaculture principles, particularly having closed loop systems and trying to have self-sufficient gardens, like for example making compost from local materials that you can find around, like seaweed and horse dung, and using the materials that are around to try and grow food. Permaculture wasn't a word that we deliberately used at the beginning, partly because it can be quite exclusive or potentially jargonistic word, and that we felt that would be off-putting in trying to get as many people as possible involved. If you say we're starting a permaculture garden, then a lot of people don't know what permaculture is. Whereas if you focus on growing food for self-sufficiency, and we're going to try and increase food production in the island, that's language that is much more accessible to the community at large. So I would say definitely that the project was founded in permaculture principles, but that wasn't overtly so.
A lot of the work focuses here on getting people involved in growing food themselves. Why is that so important in places like Arran?
It's really important for people to have the skills to be able to grow their own food and produce their own food, so that they can be self-sufficient themselves. I mean, the thing about Arran, or any island in the west of Scotland, is it's almost like a world in itself. So it's almost like a little microcosm of the whole world. So I think it's really important, particularly important in a place like this, to demonstrate how you can make food locally grown. And I think it's also important because when you have long supply chains, you often can't check how the ethical production, or you don't always know the conditions, or, for example, what chemicals are being used to grow the food. Whereas if you have those skills yourself, then that's like a proof of how good quality the food is, and you can see how it's been produced with your own eyes. You're part of that whole process. So I think that's why it's so important.
Well, there's nothing more traceable than you putting the seed in the ground, or whatever the proverbial is, alongside the whole journey. There's nothing more traceable than that.
Completely, yeah.
How do projects like this help build resilience in the island's food system alongside farmers, growers and producers?
I think that's a great question, particularly because we are not any of those things. We're not farmers, it's not a market garden. A community garden is very different from a market garden. But that helps to produce a lot more variety. Like market gardens are often constrained by products that they know are going to do well in a veg box, for example. Whereas a community garden, it can be much more diverse. It can give people a lot more room to try different things or maybe try new things that they wouldn't have tried before. It also gives a room for failure because market gardens are based on success rates. You have to do well if you're going to meet your bottom line. Whereas these are very experimental spaces where you're encouraging people just to try things out, whether they're going to work or not. That leads to people learning, really, if you learn from your mistakes. So it's not a place where mistakes have such a critical outcome if it was in a commercial operation too. I think using as much space as possible to grow food in different ways is important, and all of the different kinds of production that you mentioned are important. So this just kind of helps to fill a gap, and also it gives us hyper local produce. In each village you can find different produce being grown which is specific to that village. So
I mean, you're talking there about that ability to trial, Simon, and not being hamstrung by this needs to be a commercial success. I mean, the clue's in the first word, pioneer. You know,
yeah,
that's what this is here for.
exactly.
Which I like. And to sort of draw it to a bit of a close there, Simon, looking ahead, what would success look like for the Pioneer project and community food growing on Arran?
Well, that's a great question. And I mean, land access is something that we touched on. So for all the community gardens that we helped to set up, we actually have only just scratched the surface. We've only maybe touched 10 or more acres, and Arran's about 100,000 acres. So right now we're focusing on making more land available to young people who want to grow food through crofting and through woodland crofting, which also is building a model of community land ownership. Because the other thing about the gardens is that they're all relying on goodwill of the people who own the land. We're actually trying to explore a model where the community is the landowner and it can give a long-term lease to crofters or young people who want to come and set up and grow more food here. Because I mean, you can see Arran's pretty vast. We've got a lot of space here, so it's coming back to the very basic principle of why we started in the first place, which is to turn disused land to food production, improve land management in places, so that could be scaled up quite a lot. So that's what the next phase is for us, really.
Feels like the natural progression, doesn't it? Being able to take it more in-house, not having to rely on, albeit goodwill's obviously appreciated.
Completely, 100%. And we wouldn't,
not having to rely on.
We wouldn't have got anywhere if it hadn't have been for the goodwill of both estates, of the National Trust at Cladach, and the garden here at Cordon belongs to the woman who lives right next door there, Margaret. So that's all based on her goodwill. So none of these gardens would have happened without that. But goodwill doesn't mean security, and you never know when circumstances are going to change. So and it comes back to permaculture as well. If you're looking to the long term and you're looking to the future, then security of land ownership and tenureship is important.
Such a big thing across all of this has been the fact that neighbours help each other.
Yeah.
There's unofficial collaboration, there's official collaboration, and the community is so valuable here. And that's lovely. That's a really nice note to end on, the value of that goodwill. But yes, the natural progression is making sure there's that security and sustainability. Yeah,
and I think it's really important to underline that the Pioneer project didn't come out of nowhere. We built on a tradition of neighbours sharing skills, the knowledge and experience of well-established gardens in Arran, and we could learn from different people about all the experiences that they'd had over 10, 20, 30 years of growing, so that we didn't have to reinvent the wheel. I think, that's the kind of crucial point to end on.
Simon, thank you very much.
For the next stop on our journey, we travel a few miles south to Whiting Bay, home to Ireland Gourmet, a flourishing market garden and takeaway business run by chef and grower Robin Gray. Robin is working to strengthen the relationship between growing and cooking in the hospitality sector, demonstrating how sustainably produced seasonal ingredients can be used to celebrate the unique flavours on Arran.
We're here now with Robin Gray of Robin Gray's Island Gourmet. Robin, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Robin, you're both a chef and a grower here on the island. How did that journey begin? What led you to start growing your own ingredients?
Well, probably started off when I was a kid and we came down here on holiday with my dad, and we came down to the caravan. We had a plot of ground. We put the potatoes in Easter time. We harvested them in the summer holidays. We went out fishing, caught mackerel, had mackerel, fresh new Ayrshire potatoes, and I took it from there. I was into fishing. I was into catching rabbits. I was into food. I didn't bother taking any O grades at the time. Left school, went to catering college, then went down to London, then went to France and started travelling, and I took it from there, and that's where the whole connection. 30 years ago, I stopped the full-time chefing work, and I started the growing and supplying hotels and restaurants on the island and on the mainland as well.
You grow a huge range of salad leaves, herbs and veg here, Robin. What is it about Arran's landscape and climate that allows you to grow such interesting produce?
It's west coast, it's wet. We have recently, in the last few years, had droughts, but we've got irrigation here, we can put that down. Last 10, 15 years or so, I've reared on pigs. We do our own pigs. We've got some store lambs up there, which will nearly be mutton by the time they go off. So that goes on our menu. I like to have small amounts of stuff that, it may be quite expensive for me to produce the pigs or even the store lambs and stuff as well. We cooperate together with, like, Dan Curry. He gets me the weaners in and the same time as his weaners, and when all the pigs are ready at the same time, he comes and picks mine up, takes them out to the slaughterhouse. Mine get done at the same time as his get done as well.
I think that's a really important part. You know, you're talking about it's not cheap, but you're not producing a low-level quality product. You're producing a high-quality product. That's
what I try and do. It may be takeaway. You maybe get it in a cardboard box, but I like to look for the best quality lamb, pork or whatever, or seafood, which we've got here as well, and put that on the plate.
And a lot of the ingredients, Robin, go from right behind us, metres behind where we stand at the minute, straight into kitchen. How does that closeness between growing and cooking change how, I guess, you think about food?
We do the festivals, we do the burgers, a lot of your things like piccalilli, all your pickles and stuff were done through leftover veg that get cut up, so that's what we done. We started doing blue cheese sauce from Arran. We had the piccalilli made from the leftover pumpkins and carrots and things and cauliflowers and different veg that we had. A lot of these things were, at the end of the season, pickles were made out of something when there was a surplus, and it was a way of preserving them.
So much of everything we've been covering has been about that circularity piece. We've very rarely heard people saying we chuck that out. You know, someone spoke about a waste product and then 2 minutes later said, but that's then used by X, and it's a really good story we have.
That's it there. If you look at the side there, that's fish boxes there. They've got this worm compost in there, and I've collected a lot of the leaves from the school as well. And we do bokashi. That's the yellow buckets. I've got bokashi in there. They go into the buckets. They go into the fish boxes, and we keep that going round all the time. You probably saw up there, there's a fire pit there, and we've been burning the mussel shells and the oyster shells and the seashells, and that gets crushed down and put over the beds as well, so it gets recycled.
And you've been doing what we call farm to fork long before it was cool. Why has that approach always made sense to you on an island like Arran?
Just been so natural. It's probably made sense to me when I was out in France. All these chefs had their market gardens to get them the freshest, best produce they could. And when I came back after travelling in France and working with Rue Mont Blanc, I looked at these things and we didn't have these things available. And I like growing. For me, it was a natural progression. Nearly 40 years ago at the White and Bay Hotel, I still, even my days off, I took the stuff out to the mainland and sold it there as well. And I done a bit when I was at Creelers. In my days off, I went fishing, caught lobsters and things as well, and brought them back.
If you could tell us what we have here in the garden.
In the ground at the moment, we've got pink fir apple potatoes, we've got Charlotte potatoes. The majority of them will probably go to the Corrie Hotel. They really push the boat out, these guys. Now, if you're asking me, I wish we could get these guys cloned and get more of them coming over the island. That's in there, that's elephant garlic. That's the apples coming into blossom. Pears there as well.
So if someone's over here, Robin, maybe they're already on Arran, and they get in touch with you, get in touch online to book a meal from yourself. When people eat that dish, made from ingredients grown surrounding us here. What part of Arran's landscape and season do you think they're experiencing? Which will change, I assume.
It'll change, yeah. In the summertime, we've got lobsters. I use things seasonally. I could get lobsters in the winter time, but they're more expensive. If you look at supermarkets, you're getting strawberries right throughout the season now as well. I've just planted some raspberry canes in there as well. Because we're cutting it down with the growing for the mainland, I can do more individual stuff that I like myself as well.
We're coming up to Wimbledon season. Everyone's going to have their strawberries and cream, and they're going to be doing the exact same thing when they're sitting watching the King's Speech on Christmas Day.
Yeah, yeah.
You can't expect to have that. We've created a world where that's normal, and it's really not the best for the environment. There's a lot of challenges with that.
Absolutely, that's absolutely. I mean, when people come down here, even if they've just ordered some takeaway, they look up here and there's pumpkin and the produce is growing. You can see it here. Your fish and chips will be 10 minutes. Go and have a wee look and wander in the garden. Oh, you've got this growing, you've got that growing, so people can see it.
Your fish and chips will be 10 minutes. You couldn't pick as the garnish for it.
That's right. Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
I really like that. Robin, thank you very much for your time.
Not at all. Not at all.
Our first two interviews focused on growing food in cultivated spaces, but for much of human history, the boundaries between food production and the natural world were far less defined than they are today. Rather than relying solely on crops grown in fields and gardens, people gathered a significant proportion of their food directly from the landscapes around them. Even after the introduction of agriculture, foraging remained an important part of life in many remote island communities, providing wild foods such as berries, seaweed, and edible plants alongside cultivated crops. Our next guest, Zoe Hughes, who you may remember from our earlier episode on Arran's venison story, is helping to revive the knowledge and connect people with the island's rich foraging heritage. Through her work, she encourages people to build confidence in identifying, harvesting, and enjoying wild foods while developing a deeper understanding of the natural environment. We're here with Zoe Hughes. We're going to be talking about foraging today. How are you, Zoe?
I'm doing good, thank you.
Good, I'm glad. Off the bat question to start, can you tell us first off, can you just explain what foraging is?
Yeah, so foraging is gathering, harvesting food from the wild. So food that's either escaped from gardens and grown on its own or is just pure wild that we would go and gather. Foraging tends to have this sort of image of being like a hobby. You go out with a cute little basket and you go and pick a few mushrooms. But to me, foraging is something that humans have done for our entire evolution, except for the last few thousand years where we've had agriculture, where we've done less. In some places where we have less effective agriculture, say more remote places or places where the soil isn't so good, wild food has continued to have some precedence in people's lives. It's a form of sustenance for people. So even on Arran, up until a few hundred years ago, people would have been gathering quite a lot of wild food as part of their diet.
What kind of foods here on Arran can you forage?
I mean, we're an island, so we've got loads of coastal stuff, seaweed particularly. The amount of seaweed on Arran is phenomenal. I think we could all survive off seaweed and not even dent the population of seaweed. So that's a big one. And then we've also got some beautiful beach woodlands and sort of overgrown beach hedges, which are amazing for mushrooms. We've got loads of good hedgerows, which have got all kinds of things in. You're kind of looking for environments where one ecosystem meets another. So at the coast, you've got the land and the sea, or a hedgerow is good because you've got the road and then the field, and you've got this little strip of hedgerow stuff. Those places tend to be really good for foraging. And we've got a lot of that. And then we've also got all this kind of upland hillscape where there isn't really much human presence at all. Those places, like deep in the hills, don't tend to be that good for foraging. But there are still some bits like blaeberries that you'll find up there. Yeah, it's really common. We've got a little group called Foraging Club of people that meet regularly on Arran. And basically what we do is a lot of hand-holding as a group. So I'm the one there that's the guide, the wild food educator. So I'm sort of the person that will say definitely yes or no. But then there'll be people that are a bit further ahead in their learning of those things. And I teach it to people like it's about getting to know a new friend. So you only eat it when you would recognise that friend down the road.
What's the thing that surprises people the most when they go foraging for the first time?
There's this ubiquitous kind of experience in foraging that all foraging teachers see people have again and again and again, where they have this explosion in their understanding of the world and they realise that actually food, edible, nutritious, delicious food is everywhere all the time. Like out that window, there'll be loads of food that we could eat. We could make a salad, just putting our hands out that window and and filling up a basket with food. They have this sort of explosion in their understanding, and it can be quite overwhelming for people. And then they start to ask me things like, well, why isn't this in the shop? Like something that is everywhere on Arran. Sea radish. It grows on the coasts. You might go and walk on a beach on Arran in the summer and see all those yellow flowers.
Oh, yeah.
Everywhere, that band of yellow flowers. That's all an edible plant called sea radish. Check your ID before you eat it. Don't just base it off yellow flowers, please. People will see that and like you look for the whole distance down the beach and it's like, whoa, that's all food. Why isn't this in all the restaurants? Why isn't this in all the shops? I can't answer that. We're just very disconnected from our food.
Does it come into that fear piece? Or maybe even regulatory as well?
Maybe, but maybe there's a bigger sort of cultural force at play where we are just very disconnected from our food. And if it doesn't come in a packet from a supermarket, is it food? I think a lot of people sit there. And so that means it's quite hard to commercialize a wild food into a regular foodstuff. It more comes down to an individual, put that in their diet, or like individual families or something.
It's sad to think that a foodstuff can only be deemed a foodstuff by the consumer when it's commercialised.
But that is where we are for the vast majority of people, particularly people that live in cities who don't have contact with their food. And then sometimes these people like that come on my foraging groups because they're dragged along with somebody else that is interested in foraging. And you can see them resisting this experience of sort of food being everywhere because to them food comes in packets. And that's really hard for them. I feel really bad for people like that because they're so locked into this one particular understanding of food that they can't even allow themselves to go through that fear barrier that we were talking about earlier. That parallel to that, you've also got this disgust barrier, which is the same as the fear thing, but you might eat a new mushroom and like the actual experience of it is disgusting in some way because it's so new to you, you've not got any way to place it in your brain. Or like a new wild meat, something like that. If you first ate a wild duck, I think you might have this, it's so different from everything else and I don't really know how to process it. So I think the people that view food as coming in packets are just really affected by that, which is a cultural thing. That's how we view food.
An open mind in just about anything is beneficial.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny you explained that and someone's been dragged along. That really sounded like me when I went to the Sound of Music experience with my girlfriend in Austria. But I thought you were going to go down a different route and I embraced it and loved it. Does that also happen? People
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
We've kind of touched on it there, but that sort of responsible harvesting side is important. It's a big part of foraging. How do you make sure people learn to gather food without both damaging the ecosystems but also themselves?
This whole principle is called reciprocity. If you're beginning to make friends with the wild food and getting to know them, you then need to give something back to them. And just the sheer act of gathering it almost compels people to do that in some way. So you can do it in simple ways like picking litter, but you can do it in more complicated ways like eradicating invasives, campaigning, or whatever people feel called to. There's no prescriptive way to do it. You just connect more and you just suddenly become this caring ambassador for the place. It just naturally happens. I don't need to teach that.
I like the concept of reciprocity over what's become a narrative of offsetting. I feel like offsetting the concept makes sense, but it also doesn't.
Yeah.
You know, whether that's carbon offsetting. Oh, I took this flight, so I'll do whatever. There's a rationale there that makes sense, but reciprocity comes with more of a proactive than reactive intention about it.
Yeah, that's an interesting comparison. You're not offsetting the wild garlic you take, you're receiving the wild garlic and giving something in return. It's a gift economy.
It's circular more than linear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's not transactional. It's circular.
Just to end off, Zoe, a big part of this is about people, collaboration, community. Do you think reconnecting people with wild food changes the way they think about the land and the wider food system?
Yes, very much so. It can be really powerful for that. Sometimes people want to learn just a few things that they can forage here or there, but sometimes it changes the way people view the natural world. Like the word weeds is classic. For people that do gardening, I'm not a gardener. There's a stereotypical thing that foragers are terrible gardeners. Because when you garden, you have to tend to everything, but when you forage, it's out there, it's done. You don't need to sort of baby it. But I understand that gardeners have this idea about weeds, that there are plants that you don't want. But a lot of those weeds are edible. So often people will realise, oh, I've been removing that to put in whatever domesticated version of it exists. And I could have been eating that the whole time. And I didn't have to plant the seeds. I didn't have to do this, didn't have to do that. There's this powerfully different understanding about where food comes from when you're looking at wild food, as well as there's a sort of effortlessness about the food that's just arrives around us. We just have to learn which ones are edible and which ones are not. That I think changes the way we view food massively.
So no, it's been great to chat, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our final guest in the episode is Andy Walker, who's been keeping bees on Arran for more than 20 years. Andy moved to the island with his family in 1999 to work for the Forestry Commission, and although now retired, continues to work part-time in timber production. Alongside producing a range of award-winning honeys, Andy also uses beeswax from his hives to create a variety of natural products sold across the island. As we'll hear, beekeeping offers a fascinating window into the health and diversity of Arran's landscape. So we're now here with Andy Walker of Arran Bee Products. Andy, how are you?
I'm all right, thanks. Yeah, good.
Thank you for coming on. Can you tell us how you first got into beekeeping and how Arran Bee Products began?
Yeah, it was all to do with a project at primary school, actually. So in primary 6 or 7, we had a series of talks from a local beekeeper. They kind of picked a best few, got on their kind of summer trip. So you were taken up to see their hives at the Heather. And that was, we stayed at that time in South Lanarkshire, where the hives were down somewhere between there and Moffat. So I always wanted to keep bees after that, you know. And yeah, so I started in the Forestry Commission down in Galloway about 40 years ago. And there was a forester there who kept bees, so I've got the opportunity, you know. I've kept bees all that time. When I came to Arran, though, I had to leave all my bees on the mainland because the varroa mite had taken hold in the south of Scotland, and it was having a severe effect on the bees. There were restrictions, so I wasn't allowed to bring bees out of Dumfries and Galloway. So I came over here with a whole load of empty hives. But at that stage, there was lots of bees on Arran because there was still a lot of wild bees. We didn't have any varroa. So there was bees and trees and roofs and caves. You know, there was a constant supply of swarms. Got a few swarms, and that enabled me to start again.
You mentioned about the heather there when you were at school, Andy. Arran's pretty diverse. You know, there's a lot of coastal plants to moorland heather, and our hill is quite famous for being purple because of the hiller fauna there. How does that variety influence the honey that the bees are producing?
Greatly. You know, there's a vast difference between all of the different flowers. In fact, our local bee group, we have an annual kind of a competition where we taste and kind of grade people's honey, and it's amazing on Arran the difference, even just a couple of miles. I brought along a couple here. This one here is a summer honey, an early summer honey. You know, it's pale. If you open it up, it doesn't have a lot of smell. It's got quite a subtle taste. It's got an aftertaste, a very floral. You know, and it's a mix of all your kind of summer, you know, flowers, probably and spring, you know. So, you know, a little bit sycamore in there, may, blossom, raspberries, a clover, a brambles. This one's a bit darker. This one will be Illing Heather, which has got a strong taste, a strong smell, a completely a different consistency. You know, depending on what flowers it'll be coming from, they have a great, you know, a variety of tastes and colours, smells, consistencies. Also, some honeys are liquid, some honeys are more, you know, solid, and that's all to do with the proportion fructose to a glucose.
With a focus on farming and growing, how important are those bees and also other pollinators? You know, we forget wasps are pollinating as well, and there's a lot more out there for what we have here in the island: crops, gardens, wildflowers.
Yeah, I was giving that a bit of thought because obviously, you know, our farming in the island is really based in grass, which is, you know, wind pollinated. So I suppose directly with the farming on the island, you could sort of say, well, it wouldn't have a big effect. But obviously anybody in a garden anybody trying to grow fruit, then all of the essential. I was thinking, the mix of flowers on kind of permanent pasture and upland grazing is probably, greatly enhanced by a variety. So, it's important there for the pollinators.
I think that there will be a lot of, maybe not in the island, people moving towards those sort of more diverse lays where you're not just seeing an Italian ryegrass or a Westerwold, whatever. And maybe that's where, like you say, that comes in a bit more.
Yeah.
What are the biggest challenges? I'm in the agricultural industry. We hear about the challenges of chemical on bees, looking at pesticides. We've seen we've seen neonicotinoids taken away. We've seen challenges with MCPA. But let's flip the script. What's that like from your side?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think in Arran, our farmers don't use a lot of chemicals because obviously it's mostly a grass-based system. I have had one situation where I'm pretty sure I lost a couple of hives because of a herbicide. And that was very much an isolated incident. I mean, I would say, the Arran is extremely good for bees because we've got such a diverse kind of habitat. The challenges for me, I suppose, are the weather. You obviously get most of your losses over the winter, and they can survive the cold fairly well, but it's so wet, and if they can't get out of the hive in the winter to, I go to the toilet, then begin to get diarrhea, and then there's a build up of that in the hive. They just kind of fade away.
You've harvested the honey. What is the next process? What's involved in taking that honey to what we see in the jar here?
As a beekeeper, I give them frames of thin wax, which is embossed with the hexagonal cell. So I build wax on top of that to make cells. So I give them a box with 10 or 12 of these frames in it. The first process is that you need to get the bees off of those. A couple of days before you want to take the honey off, you have to put in a clearer board, which is a board with a one-way, a valve on it, I suppose. You clear them. You take them home, and I've got an extractor. When the honey is of the right water content, they put a wax seal over each cell. You have to cut those off, and then you put them into the extractor. It works either, a radial extractor or a tangential extractor. So, as you spin it round, it flies out, and then there's a tap at the bottom. And then you have to strain it, because there's always, as in that, a process there, or bits of wax there, there's pollen, just all the kind of, a debris. So you strain that out, and then you put it into the jar.
And is that process slightly different for your paler, darker honeys, your runnier honeys, your thicker honeys, or is it relatively the same?
Well, it's the same, for all of them, except for ling heather. A ling heather produces a completely different honey, which you are not able to spin out. It comes in a jelly form, and you have to agitate it. Then it becomes a liquid. And you are then able to spin it out, but it's quite a difficult, a process. Usually you have to put it into a press, a similar type of thing if you're making juice from apples. And it's a much, much, longer a process, because, if you leave it, it will turn back into, so you have to be constantly mixing it. So it is a long, process, because you've got to mix it as you strain it.
I must say, honey jelly is quite appealing to me. And just finally, Andy, when someone buys some honey from yourself, what part of the island's landscape are they tasting?
I gave that one a bit of a thought, because, I suppose if you take a landscape as encompassing the landform and what's on that, then it very much depends on your season. So in the spring, if I get a good year, I'll have, a spring honey summer honey, and autumn honey. And the spring honey is very much the agricultural landscape. It comes from kind of sycamores and May blossom and the early flowers. A summer honey includes that, but will include the kind of almost the a bigger landscape. So it'll include a forest as well. You've got clover from your fields. It's still a lot of a clover and Arran, but you've got a lot of a raspberry and a bramble, the clearfells. And the hedgerows are extremely important. And then your autumn honey is very much your kind of mountain, moorland, a landscape, because it's all about getting heather honey. I mean, I've been keeping bees for a long time, and sort of on average, I'll get 10 to 15 kilograms per hive. But wax, because we have to cut off the cappings, then on average you'll get about half a kilogram per hive. I'm constantly accumulating wax, and in the early days I used to kind of sell it back to bee suppliers as they make these sheets to go into the frames. But then I began to sort of experiment with creams. I've kind of built a business out of that, making lip balm and hand cream, and also doing wax wraps, so they can be used as an alternative to a cling film. I sell those, in different places around the island. It's small scale, but it kind of captures people's imagination a wee bit. You're using wax as well.
Plays into the fact of you're reducing that wastage across the whole board.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Andy.
Thank you.
Great to chat, and I kind of just want to try some honey. I mean, what a wonderful way to bring that episode to a close. Honey really is a product that seems to capture something of Arran's unique character, reflecting the plants, landscapes, and the seasons that shape life on the island. And then meeting Zoe really opened my eyes to the idea that food is all around us. It was fascinating to learn how the simple act of foraging can help people build a deeper connection with nature and develop a sense of stewardship for the places they live. Our visit to the Cordon Community Garden and Robin's growing space in Whiting Bay highlighted the value of local food production spaces as places where knowledge and skills can be shared between generations. These projects are vitally important for preserving local varieties and growing practices that are well suited to Arran's climate and soils. Across all 4 conversations, I think the common thread was that all the food systems on the island are about people as much as they are production. From an agroecological perspective, these connections are incredibly important. Resilient food systems depend on strong communities, preserving local knowledge and creating opportunities for people to engage directly with where their food comes from. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend and subscribe to the Agroecology podcast so you don't miss the final instalment in our journey around Arran, which will be out next week. See you then.